We are now live. Music brought to you by, well, the song's over, so actually, never mind.
Wait, we got
Irrelevant.
Nirvana on this thing? Damn. I can't wait till they play In Bloom.
Oh, you know what? I don't think my Seasons of Harvest album is on this playlist.
Oh, we should add it.
We should definitely add it. Let me just
Yeah.
give people a peek at the album for a little bit. Yeah, Seasons of Harvest is not here.
Okay. Let's wait for folks to filter in. Meanwhile, yeah, I guess we're keying music.
I'm trying to come up with like a banter topic.
So music, I think, is a good one. So I've been listening to a ton of the Trials of Mana soundtrack.
Oh man.
Trials of Mana, which is Trials of Mana and Secret of Mana, right? The Mana series kind of soundtracks. So these were the ones I think done by Hiroki Kikuta, and so Yoko Shimomura takes over in Legend of Mana,
Okay.
and I think she sort of becomes like a series mainstay, kind of from that point on. But like Kikuta is like doing some really interesting like electronic music stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which is not what do you expect like out of like a children's fable like type action RPG that the Mana series is usually kind of associated with. Anyway, the Trials of Mana OST is absolute fire, right? Like it's
Are you
every song is like cool and distinctive, right?
are you listening to the original or the remake?
Yeah, so most of the time I listen to the original. The remake I think does a good job of like blowing like sort of blowing up the sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in like making it fuller, making it work in a 3D space.
What
There's a
the
couple
heck?
tracks in the remake that I'm not as big of a fan of because like they take the darkness away, like they sort of like sand it down a little bit. Um, there's tracks that are like genuinely creepy, right, in Secret of Mana and Trials of Mana, which again the contrast is sort of what you don't expect.
Yeah.
Anyway, good as soundtracks. Right, they've been serving as the backdrop for some interesting work. So yeah. Anyway, I recommend that soundtrack. I think it's pretty good. Uh, I I I like that very early on we have like hip hop influences, right, in like JRPG soundtracks.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would like to see more as we go down the line.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just want to say real quick, versus Ridley from Super Smash Bros. Just came on, and I was like, what the hell? It turned out I opened
Oh,
the playlist, but didn't close the previous playlist, so it just combined the two.
like have you run into like cool like combos like that? Um, where like playing like two songs at the same time like causes them to like mash up in a
I
cool way.
have so I've been getting into actually like music mashups. I've been getting
Mhm.
into there was a little bit a while ago where I heard a song on the radio when I was, like in the car, and I was like, "Oh, this song which I've never heard before has the same like chord progression for the chorus as like some other pop song." I don't even remember. It was Call Me Maybe was the song that I like combined it with. And so I got home and I like
Mhm.
downloaded the original song and I mashed them up together.
Nice, nice. Yeah, no, Carly Rae Jepsen,
Yeah,
absolute classic.
yeah, it was
Iconic Canadian legend.
it was Blow Me One Last Kiss and Call Me Maybe, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good mashup. Oh, last music subject before you jump in.
Yeah.
Listening to Charles Mann OST, that's been a lot of fun. And then one of my buddies, right, who I run like TTRPG stuff with, recommended that I check out a couple songs on the FF16 soundtrack. And I was just like, well, it's okay, right? It'll be good. I'll enjoy it, but like broadly, right? Like I'm not into like the big orchestral stuff.
Yeah.
And then these are tracks out of the DLC, and then like all of a sudden, like 4 minutes into a song, there's a leitmotif from FF14, and I lose my goddamn mind. I'm like, how did he sneak that in there, right? And it like completely changed like my view of the song, right? Because like unless you're listening to it, you don't pick up on it, and once you pick up on it, the entire song becomes like filled like with it.
Oh,
It
man.
was so cool. Anyway, this is the theme from the Sage Spire. It has to do with the Omega DLC. They're using the leitmotif of Alleg, right? Which the Allegan kind of soundtrack we get a lot in Heaven's Word, right? And yeah, it's echoed in a really fun way in the song. So that's really good.
It's very interesting to me that the Final Fantasy sort of soundtrack universe is like FF14 has been the game that they've been like, okay, the music of this game is canon to all future games.
Yeah, a little bit. It's but I think it's because it's the same composer / like audio director, right? Like being brought over, right? And like they have a couple like themes and things that like they like to repeat, right? Heck, I mean, even Toby Fox is that way, right? So I feel that I feel that there's cool stuff there. Last music recommendation before we start. The Gongaga soundtrack on the FF7 Rebirth OST is amazing. It's excellent. It's like one of the best things Hamazu has done, right? And like this is a man who I consider, right, to be like the FF sound, right, for a like a particular era, right? Okay, all right, enough fanboy nerding. Yeah,
all right.
It's all of the Rebirth soundtrack is amazing, but like I didn't pick up on how cool that song was, right, until I paid attention to it.
Yeah, I don't remember the Gongaga theme from the original game. I will continue to vamp about this for 1,000 years.
Yeah, it's because it doesn't have its own unique theme. It has the small it has the small town theme, right?
Yeah,
which we actually see repeated in like a couple places.
Okay. The Canyon Town theme is my favorite of the town themes.
That's Cosmo Canyon.
Cosmo Canyon, yeah.
Cosmo Canyon rule.
I actually thought that was Red's theme for a while, and it turns out that like Red's theme is basically we took Cosmo Canyon and just removed the melody, and that's the like concept for Red's theme, and that explains my confusion.
But like I also think like that's a good way of like doing connections between like characters, right, and places.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Is that you hear a thing that's like this character's theme, and then you go to the area that is that character's theme fleshed out, and you're like, oh, this is their area, right? And then you're able to do some storytelling based on that.
It definitely enhanced the
listen, chat. Listen, chat. So yeah, I think because we announced that this was going to be an MZ focused one, we may have a smaller crowd, but nonetheless, this is very important information if you would like to make plugins. So let's get into it.
All right. So in front of me, we have the single most important function if you are an MV developer moving towards MZ. We have the function that you must internalize in order to develop a plugin for MZ, and that is Windowbase's initialize function. No longer in the MV version has XY width and height. In MZ, it has a rect, which is a rectangle object, which contains, you guessed it, an XY, a width, and a height parameters. This difference is... Go ahead.
Before we go into the difference, what are we looking at here? So what's on the left, what's on the right?
Yeah, so on the left is RMMZ Windows, which is our MZ's Windows file. And on the right, we have MV's RPG Windows, which is the Windows file for MV. So I've got both of these files open so that it's easy to sort of compare the difference between these two files, essentially. There are going to be a lot of differences that appear significant, and some of them are significant. But there are also going to be a lot of like, oh, well, all both versions have the same functions, but the functions have slightly different code underlying them. So sometimes that's going to be important, sometimes that's not going to be important. Sometimes the functions' names have been changed, and that's very annoying because it's doing pretty much the same thing, but if you don't call it the right thing, JavaScript gets angry at you and your plugin doesn't work.
Yeah. So coming back to Rect and what I like to call an MV fake Rect, because that is a Rect in everything but name. Right?
This is an
just
unwrapped
hasn't turned
Rect.
into. Yeah,
So-
basically.
So MZ has a function called checkRect object, which if we look at, it says, hey, if this isn't an object and there isn't an X parameter, then probably this is an MV plugin. Like it literally goes, hey, if you're programming like this is MV, this is how we know that the argument you pass is not a rectangle and in fact is just an integer followed probably by several other integers.
For those of you watching down the line, and if you've been using the odometer plugin, I'm very sorry. For about 6 months, I thought there was something like fundamentally wrong with my code. I kept going back over and over, right, trying to figure out like, why is this argument must be a rectangle thing coming up, right? I'm pretty sure I'm passing the rect. No, turns out this was the error that was happening, right? Is that yeah, like I was initializing using the MV way of making a window and not like making it via rect. So this is a very common error. I'm gonna say that just to lead.
Well, I mean,
right.
Truly, if you ever see the error in MZ that says argument must be a rectangle, the odds are very good that you're using a plugin that was written for MV and then not necessarily perfectly like translated to MZ. Sometimes it might just be an MV plugin that you thought might work in MZ and then it didn't. I imagine that this is the basis on which Fossil operates, where Fossil basically says, hey, if the parameter we pass is not a rectangle but it needs to be, we'll just search for any other data we need and try and turn it into a rectangle and then pass it.
Yeah, and there's probably similar conversions being done with like sprites, right, and things like that. But I mean, like it's a cool piece of software that we unfortunately cannot condone because of you know.
We can condone it. We just can't encourage it.
Yeah, something. Basically, if you're using Fossil and you run into an error, there's very little we can do about it.
Yeah.
Right. Which is unfortunate. Okay, so the window classes, at least at the initialize, are pretty different, right? You also notice that there's a couple more functions that MZ has. So we have the check rect object. That's the big check of like whether you're using an MV or MZ plugin. But yeah, like other stuff is should be lining up, right? Like padding, back opacity, right? Tone, contents, and yeah, like and a couple other things. But we have this. Yeah, okay. The move function's also the same. So. Oh, cannot endorse. Yeah. So that was the error that was missing the odometer update. Basically, we have to in odometer the enemy odo gauge. So this is why this became an error in 1.4.0. Is that I introduced the enemy odometer gauges, but the window that I'm using to build the enemy odo gauges in initializes the MV way and not the MZ way. So basically, later on in this plugin tutorial, we will show you how to, one, detect whether your plugin is operating in MV or MZ, and then based on that, firing a different method, right, in order to achieve the same effect. Okay. Are there any other major differences in window classes before we want to switch over?
So in window base, no. However, if we go to, let's say, window gold, right? Window gold in MV takes an X and Y parameter, and that's all it takes. And then it sets its width to the window width and the height to the window height. These are functions that exist inside the window itself. If I were to go to window gold here, it's still taking a rect, and it's still setting its like width and height to the rectangle that it receives. So the width and height are no longer present here. So if I were to call window gold dot window width in a plugin for MZ, then there would be an error because there is no window width function. But at the same time, it's getting its width and height from the rect that's being passed, so from some external source. So I'm a plugin developer and I want to know where is that info. I might search window gold. I might say new window gold because that will be in not RPG scenes. We want to look in RMMV scenes. So we can see, okay, so scene message, maybe not scene message, maybe scene menus may be a better one. So when we create a new window gold, we pass a rect, and that rect is in the function gold window rect, which belongs to the scene itself. So one of the major differences that you'll see, and this is a difference in Windows and it's a difference in scenes because those two are very connected, is that oftentimes you will see windows in MV that determine their coordinates and their width and height internally. Pretty much all of that in MZ has been moved to being determined externally, to the point where scenes have a calculate window height function that did not exist in MV that does the let me see if I can find, window height is set to fitting height. Calculate window height is pretty much doing the exact same thing. It's calculating the fitting height based on the number of lines that you pass. So
one thing worth pointing out is if you're looking at the code from MZ, like kind of backend, right, comparing it to MV. So even in front of us, we have a function in the MV side of the page. If you look at window width, right, you're seeing it is returning just a value, 240. That is a set value. This is bad. Don't do this. This is what is called like passing a magic number. You will occasionally need to set constants and things to a number. However, when you're making a game, right, you're usually making it for, especially on the UI side, you're usually making it for multiple resolutions. This is why external plugins have to be added onto MV in order to do anything of like a higher resolution. Whereas MZ is built with multiple resolutions in mind. So when it calculates its height, its position, right, things like that, it is doing those relative, right, to the it's not called the canvas, right? Like what's the viewport size, right? Right. So this is probably an improvement, right? That MZ is doing, and it's definitely something to be aware of when you're making your own plugins. Is that even for MV, you can make your your width height settings. Right, that. Now, did I get disproven by the fact that they're still using the same?
I didn't know it was going to do that. I swear.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious, right? But like, okay, so but again, in my defense, look at what they're doing in the command, like the const, like WX, right, or something, right?
Yeah.
It's calculating base relative to different things. MV does this as well. So the biggest place in MV you will see this is actually in scene battle. So in scene battle, a lot of things depend on the command window width, right? They set their width based on that, right? So it'll be like it's graphics like box width minus command window width, right? It's something you will see constantly, right? Or if it's like a window that has to appear above the command window, right? It'll be like it'll be graphics.box height minus the command window height minus, right, its own like position or displacement. Yeah. So all of these calculations, what they sort of end up doing, right, is that you're using like a dummy window or something, and then you're building the other windows in the scene, right, relative to it, because you don't know what resolution you will have like going in, right, if you allow the user to change that. So we need to sort of organize ourselves, right, in a way in order to like work with as many settings as we can. However, please note, it is actually impossible to work with like every single resolution. At certain resolutions, you will need to like imagine going from like a horizontal like resolution to a vertical one, right? This is something that happens on phones extremely often, right?
Yeah.
You just have to provide different rect like settings at that,
Yeah.
right? Like when you do. Um, so yeah, it's something to be aware of, something that you can try to do to sort of improve your code a little bit, right? Is that again, use less of the like direct number things. You will still use some, right? But again, just use it for like variable. Okay, Tenchi's in. Nice.
Master Tenchi is into
Thank
his
you.
house. Which, by
Yeah.
the way, if you do run into a situation where you're like, I'm just gonna make this a number, that's like prime plugin parameter opportunity. If we want to set the
Yeah.
width to something and it's a fixed number, and you know, just to use like CGC as an example, because the sizes of all of those windows are customizable, they are all plugin parameters. So instead of saying return 240, I might say return like myth.cgc.coords or coordinates dot command width. It would be because that's what I named the plugin parameter. I put it inside an object, inside an object, inside an object. Um,
Yeah. It is also worth keeping in mind that you don't want to directly edit, right? The core the
oh yeah.
what I'm gonna call like the core JavaScript files, right?
Mhm.
Like you don't want to directly edit them. We've shown you how to do overrides, right? This is one of those things that you could do an override for, right? Is that like you grab like maybe not scene base, right? But you grab the command width off the specific scene, right? And then you're like, no, for this scene, I want it to be based on this function, right? And then
Mhm.
you return that value. Okay. Any other things that we want to cover in Windows before we move on to sprites?
Did we want to talk about gauges, or is that like too complicated for where we are currently?
So gauges will come up in sprites. So I think let's talk about the difference between sprite based and sprite clickable.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then I'll talk about gauges a little bit. It's We're not going to give you a solution for the MZ gauges, right? It's mostly you just have to learn how they're doing it, right?
Yeah.
Um, right? But we'll at least point to where you can like do some of that reading and figure it out yourself. Okay, so we're now on the MZ sprites that's on the left, and the MV sprites that is on the right. This is the JS file that has all the sprite functions. We already covered this a little bit in one of our previous dev streams that went over bitmaps, right?
Mhm.
But Isaiah, what are the differences between these two?
Yeah, so the big thing is that if you're in MZ, there's no such thing as sprite base. Let me double check to make sure that's the case, but I believe that's what I ran into. Yeah, so all instance of sprite base is only in the MV uh, uh, files. Sorry, I forgot how to speak. Sprite clickable is the new sprite base. If you are theoretically taking a plugin that exists in MV and turning it into MZ, fundamentally the only change you need to make to your sprite base like references is to turn them into sprite clickable, because pretty much everything that sprite base can do, sprite clickable can do. The big difference is that sprite clickable, as with everything in RPG Maker MZ, is optimized for touch input. So it's got this process touch function that checks to see if it's being touched, and has something for on mouse enter, on press, on mouse exit, on click, which is functionality that MV simply does not have. So if I
And
were
it
to
is it's kind of funny because MV was sort of meant to like one of MV's big selling points back when it came out was mobile support. But for whatever reason, in which they have, right? They have it for tap,
yeah.
right? They have it for tap, they have it for hold. They don't have like hover, drag, right? Like any of those other like typical like touch input kind of functions. So if you're an MV, don't despair. You can add these functions in,
Yes.
using external plugins, right? So I know TDDP has like like a pretty popular one.
Hmm.
Yanfly has like the image comment events, right? Those kinds of things. There are ways to get this into MV, but you have to do those after the fact, whereas MZ just has them built in.
Yeah.
Take it away as it.
And you can see right here on mouse enter, on mouse exit, on press, on click, in the base class sprite clickable, those functions are empty. They're called automatically whenever you do those four things. And if I wanted to make a new sprite that inherited from sprite clickable, all I would have to do is fill in those four behaviors. It's extremely convenient in MZ. If we scroll down to Sprite Battler, we can see that Sprite Battler does have something that it's doing for on mouse enter. Although what it's doing is maybe a little bit opaque. What it's doing is probably a little strange. Let me see if there are more. Let me see if there are more uses of on click. So Sprite Button is doing on click. Sprite Button is another class that is new to MZ. And yeah, so it looks like it's just Sprite Button and Sprite Battler, which is very funny. But that does lead us to get into Sprite Button if we want. I'm not sure how often MZ uses... Oh no, it looks like MV does have Sprite Button. It's just rarely used.
So MZ's big Sprite Button thing is you'll notice on the default UI, as if you go to the MZ project and launch it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so go into a new game. And then you'll notice the little hamburger icon right on the top right of the screen. All of MZ's default UI is designed sort of around that, right? So there's this little bit of vertical space that is always given if you're in a shop scene, anything, right? That is dedicated to the fact that it is pretty much guaranteed that that button will be up there. Right?
Yeah.
That button is different in different contexts, right? So here, it's a hamburger, so it's a menu button. If you go in, right? Yeah, and then other buttons will also appear. So yeah, that's sort of what that row is for, right? It's contextual, right? Depending on the scene, depending on what windows are open, right? Different buttons will appear, and you will click on them. Yes, so that is the escape button. So you can hit escape and do the same function, but here they baked it in, right? So that like it's a thing that you have to press. And a very early MZ plugin request is how can I remove it? And we can show you how.
That's with
later on.
I mean, theoretically, it's as simple as. Well, no, it's actually not, because we also have to move the UI for everything else. So yeah, we've got the Windows shop number, so there's shop specific buttons, the cancel button for a choice list. We've got the up, down, and OK buttons on a number input, and a cancel button on events as well. So yeah, that's Sprite Button. Its functionality doesn't.
Now,
oh, go ahead.
No, please finish Sprite Button, and then I'll talk about gauges.
I don't think its functionality needs to be examined too closely, because at the end of the day, it's a thing that does something when it's clicked, and its click handler works very, very similar to like the OK handlers in selectable windows. Like if I were to say Sprite Button, if I were to look for it, yeah, it's just using default behavior, but you can call set click handler and then a function that belongs to the scene, just like the set call handler for Windows. So it works fundamentally the same way.
Nice. One question before we move off buttons. So we have those buttons in CGC. Would you say like we have set them up in a pretty similar way?
So the buttons in CGC And you're talking about you're talking about like these top buttons.
Yeah, sort of. Like, so we have the buttons that show up
Oh,
in
you're talking about
scene battle.
in the
You can add them
combat,
in,
yeah.
like the end turn button, things like that, right?
So we're actually not using the sprite button class for that, strangely enough, and a part of that is because MV and MZ handles touch input differently, and I wasn't sure if using sprite button would be the best like route. If there would be some issues like when setting them up, and that was 2 years ago when I when I originally made buttons, so there hasn't been. I've learned about a lot more about the code since then. If I were building them now, I would probably inherit from sprite button, but that's not what I did when I first wrote them. I basically rewrote the concept of sprite button at the time.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so with that, let's move on to gauges. So let's look at the MV side of gauges first, and then we'll contrast them with MZ because MZ does gauges pretty differently. If you go to Windows, you'll go to draw basic, draw gauge area, draw basic area. That like those functions are pretty common.
Yeah.
So if you go to draw gauge area, so you'll see here that there's a function that splits it based on whether you have TP on or off. This checks a setting in your I think it's data system, right? Whether in the database you selected whether you are using TP or not. Here's the thing: this is a visual thing. TP is happening in the background no matter what. Right? It's just a matter of whether it influences your UI, right? In this particular battle. So you can see that in the two functions below that we have draw gauge area with TP and draw gauge area without TP. Can anybody in chat tell me what's the difference between these two? Let's give chat a minute. This is a fairly easy question.
This will be
I hope
on
you
the
guys
test.
get it. Yeah. One could even say the answer is in the name of one of the functions.
I wonder what the difference is between draw gauge area with TP and draw gauge area without TP. This requires some close examination. So let's see.
Let's give them maybe 15 more seconds.
I think everybody in chat is like not they're like, I am not falling for this engagement bait.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So the key difference is that there's a missing function call, right? So in draw gauge area without TP, they're not drawing the actor's TP, right? So that function isn't being called, right? And that particular UI element isn't being drawn. So let's actually take a look at one of these. So let's go to like draw actor HP and see how that function is set up. Yeah, so it's taking in 4 values. It's taking the actor. That makes sense. You want to draw that particular actor's HP. The X and Y position, so where on a window you want to draw this. There's a couple different places draw actor HP is used. So it is used in the battle status window. That's probably the most important one. But it's also used in the scene menu, right? And also in the status scene, and also in the skill scene, and also in the item scene. It's used in a lot of places, folks.
And that's why it's a window-based function. So while the function we were just looking at was in battle status, it's still accessing window-based functions because those functions are being called everywhere.
So it has the XY position, right, where it is, right, in that particular window, right, that it'll be drawn. And also it has the width, which is just how, like, wide you want to draw it. So if you walk through this function, you'll see that we set the width. Notice what they're doing there. This is actually a cool trick that you can do. So there's a value width, and it is setting itself to width, right? So why is it doing that? Isaiah, could you tell me?
Yeah. So let's try and okay. There's a concept in JavaScript called truthiness, I'm not sure which came first, the JavaScript concept or the Stephen Colbert segment on the
Yes,
Colbert
the
Report.
Stephen Colbert. Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't that
Genuinely
Colbert
do
Report?
not know which came first, but it is hilarious. So, Stephen Colbert's truthiness is based on how true something feels, is how much truthiness it has. In JavaScript, it's a very similar premise where every variable, every bit of data in JavaScript has a truthiness value, which is either true or false. So, a Boolean, let's say var is true equals true. Well, true is true. That's true. However, Boolean's truthiness value is true if they have data. So if I said is true equals false, that would still have a truthiness of true, which is very confusing. But if I were to say var is true equals undefined, well, undefined has a truthiness value of false. So if I were to check its truthiness, then it would return false. Similarly, integers also have a truthiness value of true, and undefined still has a truthiness value of false. So when we say width equals width or 186, what we're saying is, okay, which of these two statements evaluates to true? Is it width? And if so, then we ignore the rest of the equation. But if it's not width, then we check the next thing. And 186 is a number, so its truthiness is true. So if if the value of width returns false in some way, such as, for example, if it's undefined, then we go with 186. And that way, oh Jesus, sorry, I just kicked the microphone over. And that way we can do something like window.draw actor HP actor XY. And then if we just don't pass width at all, then the value of width is set to undefined, which means that when we ask width is equal to either undefined or 186, whichever one is true, it will default to 186. All of that is a very roundabout way of saying the width parameter is completely optional. 186 is the default value. And that's how JavaScript does default values compared to other languages where you have to manually set it.
So, for example, I remember in C++, right, like you can, in the argument line, set it to like a default value. Like you can do the test like within that function call. The reason that I'm focusing on this particular line is we will be using it later. This is foreshadowing. For a pretty important thing. So looking at the rest of the function, we have it's creating two colors, and then it's calling a draw gauge function, which is again passing this, right? So draw actor HP is going to use a generic function. Yes, Asila. So the default value is 186. In case undefined comes through, right? Similarly, you can potentially do draw actor HP and then supply actor and then X and Y and then leave the width out, right? And it'll still do its job, right? You don't have to pass a width value necessarily unless you're using it. And so all this ensures is that there is a width value that is being used, right, in these later function calls, right, that we'll get into. Draw actor HP is using a common function called draw gauge. Isaiah, could we go up to draw gauge?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is draw gauge. It's using a couple of values, but a bunch of values you already know, right? So X, Y, and width, we already ran into kind of previously. And what usually happens is that when you're calling a function inside of a function, sometimes you pass those arguments through, right, to the next function. But it has one unique value called rate. You all in chat may have used rate before if you have used, let's say, YAP buff state score, right? This is how much of the gauge has been filled, right? We covered this during the bitmap tutorial. I think two dev streams back. And then color 1 and color 2, we saw earlier, right? It's grabbing the HP color 1, HP color 2, right? And yeah, as is writing in comments, it's a number between 0 and 1, and that is basically comes down to like what fraction of the gauge is filled, and then based on that, right, we draw that. So if you look at the bottom two functions, right, so we got this fill W, right, so that is the how much of it is filled, and then the gauge Y, which is basically the height of the gauge, right, and that's roughly one line height. But the bottom two functions is again something that we've run into before. We have a fill rect, right, and we have a gradient fill rect. Isaiah, why are we using two rects? It's only one gauge, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It is only one gauge. However, gauges have two components to them. There's the part of the gauge that is filled. We have the I'll call it the filling, the color part, and then we have the actual outline of the gauge itself. We have the frame of the gauge, and without the frame, it just kind of looks like a bar. You can't really tell how full it is unless you remember what it looked like when it was as full as possible. And without the color part, it's just an empty gauge that is completely unfilled and does not give you any information. So you need both parts of those in order to draw a gauge.
Yeah, and so this is actually a pretty useful technique, right? Is that when you're building UI, right? Sometimes like the first couple plugins that you make windows and things for, right? You kind of code out every single part of it. But what if you're building multiple pieces of UI that is using redundant pieces of information? Maybe you can save yourself a bit of time by creating a function like draw gauge, right? Because this draw gauge function, we can call for other things as well. We're if we go back to draw actor HP, yeah. So we're using in draw actor HP, but we're also using it in draw actor MP, and we're also using it in draw actor TP, right? So that is three different gauges that we're using the same gauge for, right? In order to do that. Yeah. So Tenchi figured out that it was the background versus foreground. Fantastic. Yeah. And yeah, there's other components to this too, like text color, right? Drawing the text, right? Drawing the current and the max, right? All the stuff that you would sort of expect, right, of a typical like gauge. So draw gauge being exposed like a function like that is super cool, because we can call in our custom functions, right? Like in a let's say we're making a plugin and we want to draw, let's say, an encounter warning system, right? We can just use draw gauge, right? Draw the gauge right on the map, right on like a corner, see it fill up, right? And then when it goes to full, boom, there's an encounter, right? And that we can reuse RPG Maker's default functions to do that. Yeah, Tenchi. I mean, Tenchi, you've been around since Fortran days, right? So I this is probably like baby talk to you. So really sorry. Yeah. So yeah, coming back to this. Let's take a look at how MZ does things, because they do it in a different way.
Yeah. So let's find draw actor HP. Oh, there's no draw actor HP function.
There's no draw actor HP.
What the? So let's find draw actor simple status. So we've got place basic gauges. It doesn't say draw basic gauges. It says place basic gauges. So
yeah,
I've this is the first time I've ever looked at any code in MZ in this hypothetical situation, but I'm an expert in MV code. So I see this and I think to myself, it's doing something very different from drawing, because if it were just drawing, it would just be called draw basic gauges. So what the heck is it doing? It's placing gauges. This grosses me out. Immediately I'm off put. What is it doing here?
And at this point, you'll go, what is that? Right? What is a key?
Oh, I don't like this. I don't like this at all.
Okay.
Why is this in Windows status base and not window base?
I know. You're having the exact same reaction I had when I was implementing Soul status bars. And I was just like, what is this? What is this nonsense? Turns out it's actually not nonsense, but it requires a little bit of advanced programming, right, to get into. Isaiah, do you think we could pull up MS Paint and briefly describe how a hash table works, right?
Oh God, can I draw from memory what a hash table looks like? Let's do the pirate software thing real quick. Very important. That we get the black outline.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think explain arrays first, and then explain how like a hash table works.
yeah.
For those of you in chat, don't worry. This isn't the hash you're thinking of. It's a different hash, right?
Or you can start worrying because it's not the hash you're thinking of,
Um,
depending on what you're thinking, I suppose.
Apparently, Tenchi is playing Roblox. Cool.
I support it.
Roblox is like an entire ecosystem that I missed, right? Like I was at least around for Minecraft, right? So I sort of understand a little bit of what's going on there. But yeah,
You know what I mean? So an array is basically a data function which has a series of memory addresses. In JavaScript, the memory addresses don't have to be next to each other. We don't necessarily need to worry about the back end, except for the way in which it is the foundational way of thinking about it. So in array, you have 1, you have 2, you have 3, you might have 7, you might have horse. I would draw a horse emoji if I could, but I can't. And then you have, it continues on like that for quite some time.
we've talked about how JavaScript arrays defy all reason. They're only beat out by Python arrays, which can go backwards.
God. Oh no.
No, Python can use negative indexes on Python arrays.
I hate that. I hate that immensely.
Yeah.
And each item in the array has an index, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. You can do like string indexes, but by the time you're doing string indexes, you're no longer doing arrays as they were invented. You're doing some new age magic. You're calling it arrays, but it's not an array. But anyway, so
I said the thing that we're literally going to explain is using string indexes.
oh shit.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay. So coming back to this. So yeah. So we have an array. It contains different values. We have the indexes, right, that correspond to each of those values. So how do you get a value out of an array?
Yeah. So
Everybody in chat probably already knows this, but this is just reiterating a point, right? Hope folks are enjoying the music.
Hold on, I didn't make that sufficiently diagonal. There we go. So array bracket 2 close bracket, that gives us 3 because that is what is in position 2 of the array.
Cool. So now let's say that we wanted to have a more complex. If we wanted to store data in a more complicated way, right? So a typical way of thinking about this is like, let's say we're like making like a registry or something, right? So we know that like we're creating a list of people, and we're keeping some information on each person, right? It may just be one piece of information, right? But we're associating their name, right, with that piece of information. It might be their favorite, like ice cream flavors, right? Like we do a survey, right? And we give them one of those like little, like questions with like a radio box, right? And we get them to pick like what ice cream that they like. You can do this with an array. You can absolutely do this with an array, right? So if you know that like the ice cream input, right, will always be the same, right? Like it's going to be like vanilla, chocolate, mint, right? Isaiah gave me an ice cream flavor.
Moose.
Mousse, yeah, right. So if you have a fixed number of ice cream flavors, that's fine. But But what if you don't, right? Like, what if you allow them to write like a short answer input, right? So they can be like, oh, like they like Ben and Jerry's Cherry Garcia, right? That's not an answer you anticipated, but it's still information you would like to store.
Mhm.
How do you like to do that? Now, with JavaScript, you can technically do this with arrays, but in other languages, they opt for a more advanced form of data storage, right? So Isaiah, what is a hash table?
Yeah. So, a hash table. Neil is making me do a job interview. I've not had to use hash tables in like 3 years.
Whereas I use them all the time.
Oh, Neil, I think you should take over with this explanation.
Oh dear. Okay. All right. So basically, what it comes down to is that it is an array, right? It's an array, but it has a different way of accessing that information. Where the thing that we talked about, right? Where with the names of the people, right? We are using that instead of the index to get back the information, right? So Isaiah, if you could give me like a list of people, right? Like
Here, let me. So if I were to do people and then Janet as the index, that would give me an object that is associated with Janet.
Exactly, right? And so like you can do people Isaiah, right? You can do people Greg, right? So the index is replaced by what is called a key, right? This has something to do like the names come out of cryptography, right? Where if any of you've done any work with like ciphers, right? The key is what you're essentially using to turn like essentially code text right into plain text, right? It's the main way that you do that. In this, what we're doing is we're essentially storing maybe the ice cream preferences, maybe what are other forms of preferences, right? Like their age, right? Just standard survey information. And so what we're doing is we're associating their name with an object, and we're putting it into basically like a new kind of array where we can ask this data structure, right? For like, can you give me the survey information for Janet? And it'll give you chocolate 62, right? Whatever. Like I think just dot on that end.
Yeah.
So like a way of seeing this, right? Because we're just typing it up. So I think sort of visualize it, right? Kind of for them.
Yeah. So do we want to do it similar to the this?
Yeah, similar to that, right?
Okay.
Where basically I think just extend it a little bit.
Yeah. So similar to this sort of thing. Let me
I think just use the eraser or something.
Yeah, you're right.
Or I think I should have warned Isaiah that I was gonna mention hash tables.
Yeah. So essentially each let's say Janet, I know how to spell Janet, Greg.
So remember, Janet, Greg, they're all in the index spots.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, because they have the keys, right?
Yeah.
We're using the key, right, to get the essentially to get the encoded information, right? And the encoded information is things like their ice cream preferences, things like that.
And then let me grab this guy. I'll keep him there and then bring him over here so we can continue to point.
That association. So why would we do this overcomplicated thing, right? You could argue, why can't we just do it with arrays, right? And it comes down to just sort of the different types of information that you're storing, right? This may be an easier way of storing information, right? If you don't have like memory locality, right? Like if you aren't sure, like if your memory, right, like all of it will line up in the same place, right? This is not a thing we have to worry about in JavaScript, but we have to worry about in other languages, right? The other thing is that this kind of array, similar to like we can extend, right, for like as many names, right? We can also have it such that like the same name, right, could go to like multiple objects, right? Kind of within the array. So this is creating what the sum total of this, right? So hash table is one way of calling this. It's also called a dictionary, right? In certain languages. So like a dictionary that you would have right sort of in front of you. Let's say you have a dictionary in front of you. You're like, okay, I need to look up a definition of a word, right? Um, is that a word? Tremble?
There's only one way to find out.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so we have the dictionary in front of us. We're looking at Premble, right? So how would we do that in the dictionary? We would go to P, right? Then we go down to like where like PR is, right? Then PRA, PRB, right? Blah blah blah, and then make our way to Premble. And then from that, once we have Premble key, right, we're able to access the information with Premble associated with Premble. So you get the definition of it, right? If there isn't a definition of it, that's not the end of the world. So the biggest advantage of a hash table is that if the lookup fails, right, all it'll output, right, is like, yeah, I wasn't able to find it, right, like false, right, like, and it doesn't crash your program. Arrays are notorious because of how much you can walk outside of them, right, run into undefineds, right. Splicing them is a huge issue, right. You don't have to worry about all of that with hash tables. Hash tables have other problems, right? Such as you can lose the information sometimes, right? Like in them, right? But for for certain purposes, right? It's an advantageous way of using information. So this is what is called a data structure. So like we've talked about arrays as a data structure, dictionaries, hash tables, they're another form of data structure. There's many kinds of these. You can take a college course on them, right? It's probably too advanced for like what we're covering here, right? Like stuff like linked lists, things like that, right? So why have we gone this long explanation about hash table? That's because that is the method that MV has decided to use, right? So with MV, you're giving a key, right? And so the key corresponds to like what essentially is the placement information, right? So you're being like, it's actor, right? And it's gauge, right? And then you're formatting the actor ID and the type of gauge, right? So it's creating, and this is again pretty unique, right? It's taking a string and then it's adding a dot to it to format the string, right? To include the actor, right? So the way that this would resolve the const key bit, right, is that the end string would be actor, and then would be followed by the ID number of the actor, and then gauge, and then HP, MP, TP, whatever type of gauge, right, there is. One of the reasons that I can think of why MZ did it this way is that there's actually a new gauge that MZ has included. Some of you may know this as the progress bar, right, like which is the sort of pseudo HEB system that MZ has, right? So I guess they were anticipating that, hey, we're going to increase our total number of gauges. We may want to use this, right? This creates a huge issue because this is, now that it's within a hash table, it's very hard to edit, right? What the actual thing is, right? Right. And also they've associated like the thing with the gauge sprite. So the sprite is set, the format is set, right? And also the positions are set. So where are you gonna make changes, right? Like how are you gonna like make your own custom gauge, right? It's still possible, but you're gonna have to do some like sort of working around of it.
Yeah, right? So it seems like the dictionary is this additional sprites. So if I were to look at where that's set up, so it's originally set to nothing, and then yeah, so it looks like yeah, okay, I see what's going on here. So if we find the object, we return the object. If we don't find the object, we create a new sprite, store it inside the dictionary, and make sure that it looks the way it's supposed to, and then we return it. And as long as the additional sprite's object exists, we will have a reference to this gauge sprite inside the dictionary.
Yeah. So it's a more complex way of going about it, right? It's a more programmer-oriented way of going about it. It's doable, right? Because like with MV, if you go back to the MV side of it, right, you can just go in and like edit those values, right? And there will be a change, right?
Mhm.
With MZ, you're having to find out where the change is happening, right, in order to add new gauges, right, to the system. Um, so that is a major change, and that's a pretty significant one, right? It limits your ability of like what you can really do with the gauges, because you also have a lot of difficulty editing the existing gauges, right? So like let's say that like the HP bar, right, you would like it to be vertical. Where do you go to do that, right? You can still find where to do that, right? But they have sort of intentionally obfuscated it a little bit, right, while sort of setting up right to make this a scalable system.
Well, and
Okay.
it looks like the gauge itself has been put into a sprite class as opposed to something that is drawn onto the bitmap.
Yeah.
That
Let's
gives
actually
it.
take a look at the let's take a look at the gauge sprite.
Yeah, so right before we do that, I just want to go over one thing real quick. I want to point out to the audience to notice that when we call create inner sprite, we pass a key and we also pass a class. And then when we create a new sprite, we call new sprite class parentheses. This is exactly the same as saying const sprite, oh, I know how to spell, equals new sprite gauge. So whenever we create a new instance of an object, we can store the class inside a variable and then call new variable name and then parentheses, and that's the same thing. Essentially, the variable is an alias for the class. That information is going to be important to making sure that you have a plugin that works for both MV and MZ because of the differences in classes.
Okay, let's take a look at sprite gauge, and then we will move on. We'll probably skip past the manager section, because I think we've spent a little bit too long on this. Yeah,
I forgot how to spell sprite gauge. It's not
fair
here.
enough.
Oh,
It's gauge.
it's because I'm in
gauge.
scenes and not sprites. That's very silly.
Okay, all right.
It's gauge.
Gauge. Okay, so yeah, let's take a look at sprite gauge. This will probably make more sense like as we're sort of reading it, right? So it has a couple internal variables, right? Like value and max value. That makes sense, right? Target value. So, chat, if you're still alive, what do you think target value and what do you think target max value is in a gauge?
It's interesting to me, this isn't going to help the audience answer the question, but it's interesting to me that these are initialized as nan instead of just zero.
Nan instead of undefined, right? Or null, right? Yeah, I definitely think that's pretty interesting. Okay, so yeah, so chat, what do you think a target value does in a gauge? If you were around, once again, I'm realizing that like that bitmaps tutorial that we did is actually like really good, or like pretty info rich, right? Because like all of this stuff is like calling back to that.
There's a reason that I like wanted to do it ASAP.
Yeah. So let's give them maybe 30 more seconds before we reveal it. Meanwhile, I think go ahead and scroll down, right? So we can see a couple more of the sprite gauge functions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So create bitmap. Oh, they've hidden where they're using magic numbers.
I mean, it is
Okay,
better to have the magic numbers inside a function than inside like where is it? Draw actor HP is often done.
That like with minus 180, right? Like that is
like
pretty
this
difficult.
this is not good. You do not want to do this.
Yeah, if you can avoid it, right? Like sometimes like code calls for it, right? But always know that like
But even then,
the
I'd do something like window battle status dot prototype dot row 1 height, or yeah. Is this? Yeah, no. This is height, I believe. Rect.y height. Yeah, I'd say equals function, and then I'd return 108, and then I'd do the same thing, but it'd be row 2 height, and then it'd return 196.
Yeah.
That's what I would do in a situation like that.
Cool. All right, so we've given chat enough time. I think chat let us know if like the question was confusing, or yeah. So a target value in a gauge, right, is when you're animating a gauge, right, you have the current value, right, and then the value that it needs to move up to. If you just set the current value to the new value, so let's say you heal, right, you're at 500, you go up to 700, right, out of 1000 HP. If you go up immediately from 500 to 700, that'll convey the information that you are at a new HP value, but it won't feel like you healed, right? So the way that you can convey a gauge filling, right, is by giving it a target value. So you have the current value, right, which is 500. You set the target value to 700, and then move the value up, right, until it hits the target value, and then you stop.
Now,
why does target have a max value? It's because actually, Isaiah, I think you might have been answering this.
Well, actually, no. I was going to say this is a critical difference between MV and MZ's gauges, because in MV, they are drawn on the window whenever your HP changes, or whenever your MP or TP changes. So they're drawn once, so if your HP is decreased by 100, then, snap of a finger, your HP bar is now drawn to be significantly lower. In MZ, if you lose HP, then you get to watch your HP bar go from 200 to 100. You get to watch it halve in size over the course of, a certain amount of time.
Yeah. So one big reason that MZ did this is because of that new time progress system, because that is a bar that is constantly filling up to when it's full. Then you take your turn, and then it drains again, right, to 0, and then fills back up. So they're having to make the gauge, right, basically animate, right, because it animates by drawing like every frame, right, like what the change value is. So that's pretty important, right? That's a big jump, right, and that's a pretty decent reason for changing up what the class is. But there's some difficulty here in that, so Sprite gauge, right, this is going to be the gauge for all of those gauges, right? So HP, MP, and TP, right? How do you include a new one, right? Well, you gotta basically derive from Sprite gauge, right? And then when you go back to that scene function, right? Or I think the window function, right, where it was accessing the key, you have to provide it with essentially a new type, right? And be like, hey, you essentially want to create a gauge of this type. So it's a lot of hoops to jump through to get a simple thing working, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But there's good reasons for it, right? Like not every MZ decision is arbitrary, though it certainly feels that way when you're making plugins. Speaking of which, let's make a plugin.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm gonna skip past the manager classes differences because I think this is getting like very theory heavy. And so we're gonna start by making a plugin in MV, a very simple plugin. So what this plugin will do. And Isaiah, feel free to spice it up, right? So what this plugin will do is that it is a plugin that fires using plugin commands. And when you have the plugin command, it creates a window in a certain part of the screen, and it writes text inside of that window. And also, when you hit spacebar, right, it cycles what that text is, right? So maybe it has like a couple strings of text, right, that it cycles between. If you want to simplify that, Isaiah, that's perfectly fine, right? The main thing we want to illustrate is how plugin parameters work, right? And also how plugin commands work. And we'll show it in MV first, and then we'll try to run it in MZ and see what happens.
Okay, so to make sure that I've got it, we want plugin command makes text appear on screen, right?
Basically, right? It's within a window, but like the window can be transparent, right? Um, and
Okay.
then maybe essentially maybe some way of cycling the text, right? So it makes the text appear on screen, right? And then if you've specified like multiple strings, right, then it just goes between those strings.
Okay.
Um,
So let's say let's.
okay. Yeah, I got it. I got it. So don't worry about the spacebar input. Do you know the typewriter effect, right? Like
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's what we're doing, right? Is that we're creating like a news ticker tape, right? Like kind of effect, right? When you create this. This could be really good if you're like making like a cyberpunk kind of game, right? So like you could have like yeah, text scrolling, right? And it doesn't have to be a sprite. So you could have the sort of news or the stock market like change, right, as the player's doing actions in game. Um, that's one of those fun ludonarrative consonants, like resonance, like kind of moments. All right.
Okay.
So I think feel free to tune into the music. Isaiah, I think if you feel comfortable, narrate as you're kind of doing this. But we're gonna sort of speed run making the plugin, and then we're gonna later focus on the plugin parameters, right?
Absolutely. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm just creating a new class, which will be our which will be the window that we use, and I'm just gonna say this dot draw text, this text, and that should be 00 this dot contents dot width, and then left. Yeah, I believe it's text XY spacing and then alignment. So this very simple class right now, what it does is if you call the set text function, it's going to display the text on itself. It's going to get rid of the previous text that was displaying. This isn't the typewriter effect, but this is a simple enough thing that we can check to make sure that it's working properly before making it more complex. So now we want create text display window equals function. This is going in scene base, so it will appear in any scene that this function appears in. Equals new window text display. And then, oh, whoops, we forgot to put an initialize function. Window text display dot prototype dot initialize equals function XY width height. Window base prototype call this XY width height. This is how fast I type 99% of the time. That's not true. And then we'll just make it an empty string for this dot text just to initialize the text. And then we'll set the coordinates to 0, 0, and then let's say 400, 200. Just in arbitrary numbers. We don't want that like going forward, but just temporarily we're using arbitrary numbers. And then the last thing that we need to do, so we want to say,
so Isaiah, this isn't strictly required, but a semicolon after the text display would be good.
You're absolutely right.
Not required, by the way, in JavaScript.
Yeah, it's not required, but it sure should be done. Now we want create. Yeah, we just want it in the create function, I believe. Always good to double check to make sure that. Yeah, so it looks like every. Wait, hold on. Is the create window layer happens after the create function?
Look for create all windows instead of just the regular.
You're right. Okay, so scene map has that, but scene base does not. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Instead of trying to put it in every scene sort of automatically, we're gonna put it in scene map and scene title, and maybe scene battle as well. Create all windows equals, we want a variable var
folks in chat, feel free to ask questions, right? This requires a little bit of setup, but like it'll make sense, right? Because we're sort of teaching you, once you've gotten the plugin working, how to expose the variables to the user, right? So they can customize it kind of for themselves, right? And also how to call the functions of the plugin, right? Using the plugin commands.
Yeah, we want to override scene titles create function. All right. There we go. So now it should appear in the map and the title. So I'm going to save this, but I'm going to disable my display so that y'all don't peep at my file directory. Don't worry too much about that. Enjoy the jams. I saw somebody ask to play Pikmin music, which I think that's a good idea to add to the playlist at some point.
Yeah. What are some good Pikmin soundtracks? I think I only know the main like Captain Olimar theme from Smash.
So the music in Pikmin 1 is pretty solid, all things considered. It's very like low key, which does work for this setting.
Pikmin 4, by the way, excellent game. Please check it out.
Yeah, I played through Pikmin 1 and 2 recently and really enjoyed them. Really enjoyed 1 personally a lot. 2 was fine. But I was a lot less jazzed about it. But this isn't the Pikmin takes. Oh, interesting. Oh, it's I know what's going on here. I forgot a word.
Yeah, that word might be important.
It might be a little important.
Yoshi's got a list.
Oh, snap.
Yoshi's got a list.
Forest of Hope
Garden of Hope from Pikmin 3, Forest of Hope from Pikmin 1, Forest Navel, Cave Themes. I would just like I had a playlist ready. Thanks a lot, Yoshi.
You know what I really enjoy I don't remember the name of the stage, but the final stage in Pikmin 1, I really enjoy how like tense but also triumphant that song is. Anyway, so if I go in and I say scene manager dot scene dot text display window, and I were to say set text hello world obligatory, now it shows up. And if I say Pikmin 1, it changes to say Pikmin 1. The final trial, absolutely. I really enjoy the final trials theme. So we've got this working. We have the very, very basic version of it working. And now we wanted to do what was the extra functionality that we wanted to do?
Just doing a small sound check before we continue.
No problem. Make sure that actually the music might be a little loud. I think it might just be this specific song, but I'm like while we should I just pull up the Pikmin 1 soundtrack real quick? Or
no. I think it's good.
Okay.
We're back. Okay, cool. So we've gotten the text display working. Nice. Pikmin 1. We love to see it.
And something else that I want to do is when we do set text, we'll say this dot show which is very nice. And when we initialize the window, we'll say this dot hide. So that way, when we first boot the thing up, then we can see that no window is visible. And then if I say, okay, display the text, the window appears. And we can do something fancy. Excuse me, we can do something fancy after a certain amount of time. The window disappears. But we have the basics. We Yoshi 2500 like going hard on the Pikmin 2 OST recommendation. I'll Neil, if you wanna vamp or explain for a moment, I can pull that up.
While you do the Pikmin soundtrack.
If that's
so what
all right.
would you like me to explain?
So what are our next steps?
I mean, yeah. So now that we have the window working, we need the typewriter effect working. There's a couple different ways to do this, right? But broadly, with the typewriter effect, we kind of want to show each letter of a string kind of one at a time. So we already need to have the string, and we need to store it somewhere, and then we need to show a different string in text, right? So what we may want to do is in initialize, we have two text variables, right? So we have the text that is displayed, right? And then the text sort of info, right? Which we've sent to it. So in text info, we will have Pikmin 1 hello world, the whole string. But in text, we'll want to do in the refresh function or something, essentially every let's say every 60 frames, we show another character, right, off the string. And so every 60 frames, we'll want to check text info, and then add it to the shown text, right, so that it shows. Is that a decent approach, I say?
Yeah, I think so for sure.
And then we'll want to.
So yeah. We'll want to do.
And then we'll want to continue this until it is done, and then you have an option, right, of whether we want to kind of scroll the text, right, like because usually in like a ticker tape effect, right, like it kind of goes off screen, or do we want to stop? I think we want to stop for now, and whatever variables that we have, we can build plugin parameters out of already.
Oh, not window text display. We want to do window base.
The other thing I would recommend, Isaiah, is we should have a long string of text so we can like see this effect kind of play out.
Absolutely.
You know what
absolutely. I mean? Yeah. And I'll initialize this dot text time equals 0. Set text. Yeah, this should be underscored. Text time equals 0, and we'll say this dot text time plus plus if this text time is greater than, let's say, 4. And actually, I'll say window text display dot prototype text speed equals function, and we'll return 4. So that way, this is something that can be changed pretty easily. Then we'll say this text time equals 0, this dot text index plus plus, and we'll say this dot draw text. We want text info. Or no, we could say yeah, no, Neil's approach was right, where we want this text equals text info dot, what was it, splice, and then from 0. No, it's not splice, it's slice. Returns a section of the string, and we want from 0 to this text index. And what slice does is it gives you a section of a string. from index 0 to the text index. So I believe what will happen now, and if it doesn't work, then we'll find out. So I'll say, instead of hello world, we'll say I don't know, Neil, give me something to say.
Oh, actually, let me, because I went with the. Uh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. We're just having some audio issues, but no worries. I've switched to my phone. Let me find the Neuromancer first line, and I'll post it to you.
Okay.
It's the one that's a Sky tuned to like a dead channel. Yeah. Oh, this is perfect. Okay, I'm gonna post this to our Discord.
I think YouTube just crashed.
Actually, I'll post it in. Did YouTube crash?
I think YouTube crashed. All right, it's back. We're good.
So that's yeah. So do you see the string that I posted?
All right.
Yeah. So that's a nice long line. Right? We can show that.
So we have a very interesting problem going on here.
Okay, that's super cool, right? That like it tries to resize, right?
Yeah.
Kind of for it. So that's something we'll have to account for, right? Is that once we hit the window width, we actually want to like shift it, right? Would that be possible to do in a sort of easy way, right? Or
I mean, I think unfortunately the easiest way might be to just put line breaks in. No, of course it does not like line breaks. JavaScript
no.
String line breaks are not good.
No, they're not fantastic. So what we'll probably want to do, right, is that we grab the window width, and we're grabbing the font width essentially, right? Like the width of a character. That's a little bit harder on certain fonts, right? But we can sort of estimate an amount based on the font size, and then we know what is the number of characters that will show up, right? Before we need to do like a scroll effect, right? Or I think if you want to make it easy, sort of in your case, right? Insert a new line, right? Into the thing. So we sort of test the text info, right? Like we're like, hey, can you fit into a thing? Okay, you can't. Here's a couple line breaks. And if line breaks don't work, then yeah, we essentially scroll it so that like you're only seeing a certain part of the string. So do you know what I mean? So in this.text, right? Initially you start with the first character and then go all the way up.
Okay, yeah.
Once it's full,
I
right? We actually remove the first character, right? And we add, and then we sort of maintain it within that window width. Actually want to be controlled on the user side. Again, very soon we'll have plugin parameters. Just bear with us.
One, and then this dot text dot length -1, I believe. Now, I don't necessarily recommend doing it this exact way because this will occur once per character every time we draw text, and it won't remember to do it next time, so it'll have to do it an additional time next time. So it's not the most efficient way to do it. However, it is a very quick way to do it. This is not bad.
Oh, that's beautiful. This is beautiful. Like, well done, Isaiah.
It did stop after the comma.
That's fine, right? Like I think that's acceptable, right? And I think if we were to make this into a full plugin, we would give the user option of like, do you want it to circle scroll, right? So
Hmm.
like in a ticker, right? It just kind of keeps repeating, right? Um, which I think you can actually figure out because all you need to do is just add the text again, right?
Hmm. I'm not
Right, to kind of
sure.
keep it going,
It
right?
doesn't. It doesn't
Um,
display all the text though. Is the problem?
oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, that's what
So
I'm.
it went all the way to it went all the way to the
It misses out on tune to a dead channel.
Oh, interesting. So yeah, let's figure out why does this stop?
So, I think
Live live troubleshooting uh, on the plugin parameter tutorial.
let's do it like this, and we'll say return 30. I don't know how many characters are visible here. 26. I was pretty close. Um, so let's say var min index equals math.max hilariously, which is 0, or this dot text index minus 26, and that is our minimum index. So we can just do away with this, I think. So, and I'll explain what this is doing after I verify that it's actually doing it. That's why I test before I explain. I'm in the part of the night where I make weird noises. Okay. So now this is working as expected. Excellent. And then and then it continues off to the end. So, what this is doing is
And I think that's fine because it's okay if it continues till the end because my plan is in plugin parameters for the user to be able to specify multiple sentences, right? And
yeah.
then we just queue once one of them is ended, we just queue the next one and the next one.
And so what's going on here is I'm saying, okay, there's a maximum amount of characters that I can display. And so what I'm saying is, let's go from 26 indices before the most recently added one. That's where we start drawing. And that creates a problem if, the index is a negative number. Because if I were to say, I'll comment this out and I'll just say min index equals this text index minus 26, then we're looking at a negative position inside an array to determine what character we're drawing. And it really does not like that. You see how it just kind of pops in. And that's because index negative something until positive something is just going to return an empty string. It's going to be weird. And so it's only once the entire string is populated, once the minimum number gets greater than 0, that it actually starts to populate it. All right. So
Okay,
this is looking pretty good.
Yeah, so now that we have this, let's make some plugin parameters.
Absolutely.
So how do we do that, Isaiah?
That's a great question. So in RPG Maker MV specifically, there's something. So there's a plugin command. Oh wait, hold on. You want parameters before command? My bad.
Yeah, I think that might be the better approach. It just depends on how you want to go about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
actually, I think here's the thing. I think with this specific example, command might be better to do first.
Yeah.
Because the command is very simple, right? It is just you walk up to an event, you talk to it, right? And then you call the plugin command, and then you provide essentially the identification of what plugin this is, right? And then what the string is that you want to display, and then the window pops up and displays the string.
Mm-hmm. In MV, plugin commands are very simple. There's a function called GameInterpreter plugin command that you override, and it even says to be overridden by plugins. So what we do here is we can say var game interpreter plugin command equals, and then we'll just copy this guy. Man, this song really is... I did not realize just how dynamic the soundtrack is in Pikmin 2. Here, let me shrink this so that we can see all this code. So we want to make sure we're doing the original one because we have no idea what other plugins are modifying this. And then we can say, so command is going to be a string, and then args is going to be an array of strings. And the way this basically looks, and I'll put this in the chest, is that if I say plugin command, I can say text display, and that's the first string, and then anything after that is arg1, arg2, arg3, separated by spaces. So just real quick, I'm going to verify that that's actually correct. And I'm going to say console.log command, and then console.log args. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what I'm doing before I go ahead and write a bunch of code. Because if I'm slightly off, then I can course correct now, and that'll save me a lot of headaches in the future. So yeah, it looks like text display and then an array of argument 1, argument 2, argument 3. That's great. Because now we can say, okay, cool. If command equals text display, or maybe we'll do command.to lowercase equals text display. So that way it's not case sensitive. Then we know that this is a text display command. This is for us. Sorry, I just looked at chat for a second and saw that we posted the sky above the port was color of television. So now we want to take the arguments that we've created and say, okay, var text equals an empty string, and then for var I equals 0, I is less than args, dot length, I plus plus. And then we want to say text plus equals args I plus space. And so that's basically taking the array that our string has been turned into and turning it back into one string. And now we can say scene manager, scene, text display window, set text, text. So let's get rid of the console log because we don't need that anymore. Now we can go back in here and we can see arg1, arg2, arg3. We're good. We're golden. It's working perfectly. So if I set this back to, let's say hypothetically, the sky above the port, etc. The Pikmin music is over. I will re-begin the music very shortly. Okay, now it's not doing it, which is interesting. Oh yeah, it's because I didn't have text display at the beginning. That's my bad. I got distracted by the lack of music. There we go. Now I can focus again. So there we go. We've turned a plugin command into instructions for what to do things with. There might be other plugin commands that you want to make that change how it displays. Like for example, maybe we want if command.to lowercase equals text display, and then we could say else if command.to lowercase equals hide text display. Then we can say cmanager.scene.textDisplayWindow.hide. And all we would need to do is put hide text display inside a plugin command, and then it would hide the window. So we've got the basics of plugin commands operating properly. And I'm just gonna assume that Neil has cut out again because he hasn't spoken in a little bit.
No, I'm still here.
Okay,
still here.
cool.
I am scrambling to find first lines from other books.
That's very fair. So we've got some plugin commands, and this is, we have the command and then arguments, but we also have a command with no arguments. I think this music is a little loud. I changed it from 35% to 25%. On YouTube, anything lower than 25% is a mute. You hate to hear it. So this is all looking great, but we do have far too many magic numbers, like 0, 0, 400, 200. That's ridiculous. So let's turn these into plugin parameters. So I'm going to, as always, copy and paste some stuff from CGC Corn Engine, because it has this bit, which is comments at the top, and it has author, Isaiah Brighton, plus the Myth crew. Jesus. All right. And then we want to scroll down to, I believe it should be at param. Yep, right here. At param, and then let's say display window height. Oh, dispally, cool. And I'll do the rest of this by memory. So, and this will be a type number, and its default will be, let's say, 30. And then we want to put a description, how tall the display text window, the text display window will be in pixels. Now, what is this? These are comments, so your code actually doesn't read these comments. When we run the code, all of this gets ignored. But when we load this file into RPG Maker, if I were to open this, excuse me, it didn't work. Hold on, I'm going insane. It didn't work.
Is it expecting the
it's because it needs the colon.
Oh wow. Yeah, no, that is pretty important. That'd be right.
I'm going insane. Sorry, it needs, you guys, it needs the colon. So what's happening here is when we load a file into the plugin manager, it is reading the file as a string. Like, it takes this entire, all 113 lines. It takes this as a string, and then it goes, okay, can we find a bit where we have slash asterisk colon, and then read all of that until we find asterisk slash. Where we find that, we find the information that the plugin manager wants. So in the same way that our plugin commands at the bottom here, in the same way that our plugin commands are parsing a string that the user uses and turn it into instructions for what code to do, the plugin manager is parsing the string at the top of our file and turning that into how to display information inside the plugin manager itself. And so when I say we've got at param, at type, at default, at description, that is giving it instructions for here's the name of the parameter, here's what type it is, which changes, what the UI is for setting it. And then here's the description, and the default value is already 30. I didn't have to set it. It was 30 at the start because I set a default value. Now, if I were to remove type number from this, the UX would be a little bit different. So now instead of numbers going up and down, I might have to manually type the number, which I could previously do, but I can also type hello, which is not a number. So I recommend that you avoid doing that. Whenever a parameter should be a number, make sure to set its type to number. So that way I'm trying to type hello and it's not working. Technically, they can click on text and set this to hello. But if they do, they have no one to blame but themselves for whatever the issue is that happens from then on. Something else I like to do is I like to set the param to display window height. And this is one word, and then I like to set the text to display window height. And what you'll notice, and you'll notice this in CGC as well, if you look into a parameter, I do this thing, where you can see display window height is the information that is shown, and then in parentheses is the actual, like, param name, and that's the, like, quote-unquote variable name here. And so I like to do it that way because that makes it so that if I have to change, like if I go, oh, maybe we shouldn't have called it display window height, we should call it text window height. Well, I don't have to change the param, and therefore it doesn't actually change the values that are already stored in the plugin manager. So that's a really nice sort of way to that's a really nice way to organize your code. I'm going to look at Core Engine again for how the parameters are done very briefly. Because this bit I always just copy and paste.
Yeah. So while you do that, I'll brainstorm a couple different like plugin parameters that we could. So I know that we probably want font size. I think that probably makes a lot of sense. We'll want a like a Boolean like param to determine whether it is showing from the start of the scene or not, right? Essentially like turning it, like being able to turn it on or off. We'll want XY coordinates because we want to control where the window shows up, right? Just as we're controlling it with the height. And if possible, a string or like a set of strings that are the strings that would display, right? If you were to just call it without setting a string, like something like a default string.
Okay.
Do those all sound kind of doable?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was too busy typing to store everything you said in my long-term memory, so I may need you to repeat some of them.
Sure.
But that should be fine.
Yeah. So we have an always show, right? I like to have these in my plugins because it gives the user a very nice way of like just turning off the plugin. Right? While still having the plugin on, and usually giving them the function by which they can do it. This is because for a lot of plugins, right, you'll want to be like, okay, I want this for battle, but I like kind of want to turn it off while a cutscene is going on, and then go back to the battle. So giving the user that level of control is, in my opinion, like pretty decent plugins, right? Please don't call us out if we have forgotten to do this in any plugin. Yeah. So one thing I want to challenge you on the default text is so I think having it just be text like as the default text, that's pretty fine. But is this where we can show off structs, or do you think that might be too complex?
So structs is definitely something that I would like to get into at a later date. I think right now
Okay.
we just want to focus on the basics of, because I love structs. Anybody who's seen like version 1.6 of CGC will know that I love putting structs in my plugin parameters. Um,
Okay.
but
So in
I
that
think
case, let's not worry about X and Y because that's what I was going to suggest is that we do it via the chord struct
yeah.
that we operate.
And width
But yeah,
width
I
we
think
like to put above height because that is easier on people's brains. So I'll reorganize those real
yeah,
quick. Um, and if
yeah.
I
With
were
width and
to,
height, we have default text, and we have it always show what else. So I think text speed, right, would
oh,
also be a
absolutely,
pretty good one.
absolutely,
And we already have a function for this. So this is a good opportunity to show how we process the params. Although I think you're already doing that, right? So you're storing params, but you're not doing any like JSON.parse kind of stuff, right? Not
yeah.
yet, anyway. Okay, so that's coming soon. Folks in chat, feel free to sound off. What are other parameters you think this plugin should have?
Now
Um,
I will set
one
a
thing,
max to text speed to 120, so that way the number cannot go higher than that, and that is one character every 120 frames, one character every 2 seconds. If you want to go, well, maybe if you want to go slower than that, you can. But one thing you can't do is instant text. If you want instant text, you've got the wrong plugin. So I'll set the minimum to 1, because 0 would be instant. 1 is one character every frame. And we can watch as I go to text speed. If I try and set this lower than 1, it won't do it. If I go into text and I set it to, -3, then sure, that'll get set. But as soon as I open it up again, it goes back to 1. So it won't go any lower than 1 if I set the minimum value, which is really useful. So I'm gonna boot up the game, and I stored all of this in a variable called params. So if I go into the console and I say, okay, what are params? So we have this nice object where always show is set to false, default text is set to a blank string, and then display window height is 30, display window width is 400, text speed is 4. Now, all of these are strings. However, that's fine for now, because something that we can do now is we can say, okay, var window display equals new object, and we can say window display dot always show equals params dot always show. But we don't want it to be a string, but we can parse a true or false by saying JSON dot parse. And then we can say window display dot default text equals params dot default text. We don't need to do anything with that. It's a string. It's going to stay a string. That's totally fine. And then window display dot display window height equals, and then we want number params dot display window height. And then we'll do the same thing with display window width. And then finally, last one.
This is something that those of you that have been keeping up with the dev stream should be familiar with. I think we talked about this in our last dev stream because we were talking about no tag parsing. So this is parsing, right? Like this is essentially taking an input and then trying to like figure out like meaningful sense right in it, right? And so we do it by the specific technique, which is casting, right? Making sure that we have a string, we want it to be a number, so we can process it down the line. Isaiah, did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you add
Cool.
30 plus 30, you get 30. It's not good. You got to do 30 plus 30, or 30 plus number 30. Oh my god. And that's basically what we're doing here. So now we have an object which contains all of our parameters, and we can use that as at our discretion. So for example, let's find our text speed function here. So we previously were returning 4, but let's return window display.textSpeed. And now immediately what we should see is that if I were to say go into window display and set the text speed to 1, then when I refresh, I start a new game, I go in here, and it's immediately going much faster. We'd actually love to see it, as opposed to, you know, I'll go in here and I'll set it to 10. And I hit save, and I refresh, and I start a new game. Now it's much slower. So immediately we've assigned our plugin parameters to the actual variables within the game. And we can do the same thing with all of our other variables. So we've got default text. So what we can do is set text, or we'll do it in the... No, let's not do it in the plugin command. Let's do it inside set text. And we'll say text equals text or window display.default text. And we're using the set a default value inside a function parameter that we discussed earlier in the stream. I swear we've played every song from the Infinifactory soundtrack by now. It's not a long soundtrack, admittedly. So now that should essentially show up. We can test it, but we need to set the default text first. Let's get the display window width, display window height next. So when we create here it is, var width equals window display dot display window width, var height equals window display window height. So now if I refresh, maybe it's a little too short, I'm thinking. Maybe that's a bit on the short side.
Yeah, that's tiny.
Maybe it's a bit short. So we'll go in and we'll say, hey, window height 30. Let's double it. Make it set to 60. Better to overcorrect than undercorrect. That's what I always say. That's why all of my relationships have been so positive. All right, that's almost enough. We did undercorrect, but that's okay. If we go to, let's say, 90, that should be fine. There we go. We could maybe shorten it a bit. I'm not too worried about that. That's up to the user to figure out. And so the last one is always show. So when we say hide.
So I want to slightly change the always show.
Okay. Yeah.
So my thought is, right now we're rendering the text within a window. Maybe the user doesn't want to show the window, right? Like the text should just appear sort of floating on the screen. So would it be possible to hook up the always show to the set window background type?
Sure.
Yeah.
If not this dot hide, we want
Yeah. So if it is ready to show, right, it is set to, I believe the background type is 0. And if it is set to false, it's set to 2, right? You can show off a ternary operator here if you want to scare people in chat.
I think you're absolutely right that this is the perfect opportunity. Let me make sure I've got set background type. So it's 0 and 1. Okay. So here's what I'm gonna do. Yeah. Var bck type equals window display dot always show question mark 0, otherwise 1. And now I can call this .set background type BCK type.
Okay, so what's in front of your screen may frighten you and scare you, but I assure you, this is what normal programmers do.
This is a
So
condensed one-line if statement, basically.
exactly, right? So the ternary operator is usually the question mark, and then it's followed by a colon. So the first part of it, which is the stuff that is to the left of the question mark, that is a boolean, right? Like, so that is whatever would be inside an if statement, and then it asks the question. And so the values after it are what happens when it's true. That'll be on the left side of the colon, and then whatever happens if it's false is on the right side of the colon. You can stack these, but we're not going to get into that. Just know that it's a way of compressing an if statement. That is helpful, right? Like when an if statement is just this simple, right? You can just do it as a one line. Oh,
Yeah, so type 1 is show background dimmer. So I think type
all right.
2...
It's type 2. Yeah, I think type 2 is high. Oh, the background dimmer was actually pretty cool.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Okay, so we have hooked up all of the plugin params at this point, right?
I believe so.
Excellent.
Honestly,
So
this is a pretty cool plugin.
Yeah, we should sell it. We should sell it for $1. No, storefronts don't accept costs that low anymore for whatever reason.
Yeah, inflation.
Is it because of chargebacks? No, it's not just inflation. It's because of chargebacks, right? Because anyway, I'm not gonna get it.
Yeah.
That'll be a future dev stream, which is how to set up your own storefront, right? Yeah, but for this one, okay. So that is a plugin that is done. We're done. We're ready to ship. But then we remember there's another engine. How does this plugin fare?
Well, there's one fast way to find out. And in order to do that, I need to open up my window browsers again, which means goodbye visuals. I'm not showing you all that.
Yeah. So while Isaiah sets that up, I posted a link in chat. So we've gone over some of the basic plugin param syntax, but there's a lot more here. So I posted a link in chat to a GitHub, which contains pretty nicely done documentation on sort of every single type of the plugin syntax for MV, right? So there's better organization that you can do. There's things called structs, right? That you can use to set up your information a little bit better that way. Please check that out. Give it a read through, right? Use the plugin that we made this session as sort of a launching point, right? Because you can kind of go wherever now that you can do this. Okay. Do we have any questions, folks left in chat of what you saw? Right? So we went through this chapter. We made a plugin. We made the plugin commands for the plugin. Then we went and made the plugin parameters, right? And then we hooked up the parameters, right, so that the user can change around the values. I think the last step we forgot, and it's a pretty important step, which we don't want to forget, is documentation. You absolutely want to write the plugin help file, otherwise people will have no clue.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We'll get into that, right? But it is funny that we didn't fill out the documentation because you always forget to do that before the end.
Okay, you're not supposed to tell them that. So I'm gonna hit OK here, and there's this little line here that says the plugin window Myth window display may not support RPG Maker MZ. I'm going to ignore that because I'm sure it's fine. It's probably fine, right? It's not going to crash the moment we boot it up, right? It wouldn't do that, right?
Well, because we're so confident, let's make an event. No, okay, yeah, all right.
There's that argument must be a rectangle thing again. Now, what was the problem with? Let me see. argument must be a rectangle. Interesting. And that's what happens when we try to create a window and we don't pass a rect object. So let's find our plugin that we made, Myth Window Display. New window text display. So we pass XY width height, and we just pass XY width height. That's completely fine. But something that we want to do is we want to say, if this is MZ, then we want var rect equals new rectangle 0, 0 width height. And then we want to say this dot text display window equals new window text display.
Yeah.
Rect.
And so maybe we want to do a couple of these not within the function, but like above, like where we were parsing the params. It's not required for it to be there, but we just want to put it in a spot where we can add to this, right? As we go on.
Mm-hmm.
Does that work for you, or do you want to do it inside the function first?
So I want to do it inside the function first, because I think it's going to be like slightly more useful that way.
Sure.
So how do we determine if we're using MV or MZ? The way that we do it in CGC is a little silly, but it gets the job done. So we say var using MZ equals utils.rpg maker name equals MZ. I don't think MV even has utils.rpg maker name, which certainly means that if it's MV, this evaluates to false. So now we know if using MZ is set to true, then we're using MZ. So now we can say if using MZ, and then we can take this code that I just created, else do the original way. So if this looks good, I don't necessarily need the whole thing to work. I just need this error to go away. If this error goes away, then I know that we've done it properly. Okay, good. We've done it properly. Or, well, we've done that properly. Let me just open up the console to make sure there are no errors.
There's a couple more steps.
And it looks like there's no errors so far. So we're good. Now I will... So first I'll get rid of this. And then what I'd like to do is I'd like to say... window display dot using MZ equals, and then we'll take this code here. So that way we only have to check this once and it's just storing a Boolean. And that way we can just reference it whenever we need to. I'll refresh to make sure everything's working okay. And everything's working.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to a little bit earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was referring to earlier. It's like you want to set these up ahead of time because multiple functions may end up using MZ, then do one thing or do the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is all fine. Let's add a treasure chest. Let's see, chest. Let's add a treasure chest that has the plugin command. And oh, this is a different UI. This is not, we can't just type shit in. Sorry, we can't just type stuff in and get plugin commands working here. So it looks like what we've written for plugin commands just isn't going to work. Let's go ahead and, since we're here, we knew, let's see, this code, scene manager scene text window display dot set text. Let's put that in the MZ's.
You want to go into the game maybe because it's on scene map.
That's true. It's not showing up. Let's make sure our plugin parameters are set up properly. Yeah, discard these changes. Oh, geez. Always show. Let's set to true. Just to make sure that...
At least the window is showing up.
Yeah, yeah. And then let's get rid of the hide call. Oh, it's already gotten rid of. Cool, cool. Oh, we found it, the last Infinifactory soundtrack. Okay, so it's present. It's very thin. That's what the issue was.
Yeah.
So let's set this back to 90. And that's the problem with bad default values, by the way. So it's here.
Yeah, so an important thing if you're making like commercial plugins, your users expect the plugin to be plug and play. This is unfortunate, right? Like even like complex plugins, right, have to be this way. So you'll absolutely want to make sure that whatever the starting values are, it can run, right? It doesn't like immediately crash, right? It may not run ideal, right? Like it may not work with the rest of the settings, but at the very least, it doesn't crash. It shows its function, right? And then the user can customize it from there. But yeah, at the very least, we can summon it, right? And it is working. It looks pretty good. But we really want to be able to do this through plugin commands. Now, Isaiah, how do we set up the plugin parameters and the plugin commands for MZ? Because there are some teeny weeny little differences.
So the good news is our parameters are mostly pretty good as they are. There's very little that we need to worry about when turning parameters from MV to MZ, unless there's something critical that I'm forgetting, which you can point out at this time. However, plugin commands are completely different, and plugin commands are actually done through this help section, just like parameters are in MZ. So we can do command. And then it was, what was our command? It was text display. Yeah, we'll call it command text display. And plugin commands work exactly like parameters in that I can also set a text that is display text. And then I can say arg. Here, I'll do space so we can see arg text. And that is, we don't need to set its type because it's text, and we can set its description to the text to display. Now you can put this before, or you could put this after the list of parameters, and that will work perfectly fine in MV. However, that'll work perfectly fine in MZ. However, MV doesn't understand how to interpret commands, and so whatever like text you put at the end will replace the text for the most recent parameter in MV specifically. So it's always good to put commands before parameters, even though that's not necessarily the most intuitive way to do it. So now, sorry, this is MV. So now I can go in and I can say, okay, I want a chest. I shouldn't have canceled the whole thing. I still want the chest. I'll go into plugin commands and I'll choose Myth Window Display. Now it recognizes Myth Window Display because Myth Window Display has a command called display text. And sometimes, in my experience, the arguments don't always appear immediately, so I have to hit OK and then re-enter. But now I can say text, and the text is, let's see.
The sky above the board. What's the color of the television?
The sky above your face was as stupid as that which was below. Idiot.
Okay, so we're getting to, we're getting to the part of the night where
we're getting to tired Isaiah hours. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So what's gonna happen is I'm gonna boot this up, and it's still not gonna work. And the reason why it's not going to work is going to be obvious if you think about it, but I'm still going to make you think about it. So Neil, why do you think this is not working?
So we set up the text, right? We did the display. I guess it has to do with the function. Like, do we register the function?
That is exactly correct. So we set up a command, but we didn't tie anything to this command. So in MV, we have game interpreter plugin command. This function does not exist in MZ, very confusingly. So what we do instead is we say, okay, first we want to check to see if window display dot using MZ, because if not, we don't want to execute this code. This code will not work in MV. And we want to say plugin manager dot register command. Oh, not register to command. And now we want the name of our plugin, which is myth window display. And then we want the name of the command, which is what did we call it? We called it text display. Now this is what it's called, not what it displays when not what it's displayed to the users. And then we want to say args equals arrow, and then do one of these, and then end this with a semicolon. So we want const arg0 equals args.text. Now we know it's args.text because args, normally we expect args to be an array, but this time args is Neil, what would you say args is in this case?
So
instead of an array, it is an object which has a list of names, and those names are the indexes, the way that numbers are the indexes of an array.
right. So similar to like the hash table setup that we talked about earlier.
Exactly. See, I'm bringing it all the way around.
Yeah, no. Like, there's a reason that we did like ominous foreshadowing, right? Because like truthiness, like that statement came up, hash tables came up, right? The last one that has to come up is the sprite-based Sprite clickable, but yeah. we'll talk about that.
Yeah. And so, fortunately, because this code is right here, I can just copy it and paste it, and we can say text display window dot set text. So now what we've done is we've said, okay, we've created a command called text display. Now we've assigned that command to this behavior. So now that we've done that, we can boot up the game again, and we can say, okay, new game, go to the treasure chest, and boom, boy, I really am tired, aren't I?
Yeah, you definitely are. Okay, so that is so. There are going to be other commands that are a little bit more complex than that, right? Like that have like multiple arguments, right? That you have to like sort of piece apart, but they follow this general principle. I'm going to post another link in chat, which is there's a very nicely written up like MZ plugin documentation guide that a lot of the JP devs have been using for quite some time. That very nicely goes through and explains like each of the things that you can do, all the differences, right? So once again, we're assigning reading. So Isaiah, hardness level, can you give me on a scale of 1 to 10?
I can probably keep going for another like 5 minutes, but I'm gonna want to wrap it up pretty soon.
Yeah.
So if there's like a last minute thing we can go to, then.
Yeah. So the last thing, and I neglected this when we initially made the plugin, because it didn't make sense for MV. But I wanted to draw a sprite in that window. Let's say it's like the thing that is talking, right? When the text is appearing, right? So I want to like draw a picture, like a draw sprite in there, and it needs to work in both MV and MZ. So we're in MZ right now. Let's figure it out. Let's figure it for MZ. But then when we go to MV, we'll notice that like, oh, it's not drawing like at all, right? So what's going on there? And so that gives us an excuse to use that splitter between the sprite base and the sprite clickable, which is the last piece of information I think the people in chat need, right? The people in chat and the good people watching this after
Okay.
to kind of build plugins that work both in MV and MC. Would that be okay?
Yeah. So I'm gonna do this the quick and dirty way. Is that okay? Rather than the like extremely professional way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'm gonna say this dot speaker sprite equals new sprite button, and I'm gonna say var bitmap equals new bitmap 4848 because everything is in 48 increments. Bitmap fill. Is there a fill circle in? Let me just fill circle. Dang. Unless I misspelled circle. Nope. There's draw circle. Of course. Why would I think it would be fill circle?
I don't know. Fill circle makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
like
I mean it makes a lot of sense to me too. What's the radius of a circle? 24? Yeah. And then color will be red. Sure. And then I can say this dot speaker sprite dot bitmap equals bitmap, and then this dot speaker sprite, this dot add child, this dot speaker sprite. So this is a quick and dirty way of saying, okay, I've added a hold on a second. What's going on now? Did I say button? Wow, I'm tired. Should be clickable. There we go. Now we got a red circle in our window. That's exactly what we wanted. Or at least it's close enough.
Fantastic.
Ignore the fact that it is now covering up some of the text. But if we go into MV, Sprite clickable doesn't exist in MV. If I go into RPG sprites, there's no such thing as Sprite clickable. They have Sprite base. Now, what I could do is I could say, if window display dot using MZ do this, else this dot speaker sprite equals new sprite base, and that would work. That would be good. That would be perfectly fine. However, maybe I want more than one sprite, and I don't want to do this if statement every time I add a sprite. So I'm gonna do it the cool way. I'm gonna do it the way that people who wear sunglasses indoors do it. And I'm going to say
at night.
At night, exactly. Window display dot sprite prototype equals window display dot using using MZ question mark. Oh man. Sprite clickable.
Yeah, again, another good place to use a ternary.
Absolutely. So what this is doing is it's saying, okay, we've got a variable called sprite prototype, and if we're using MZ, then sprite prototype is sprite clickable. Otherwise, it's sprite base. So, thanks for stopping by, Yoshi25.
Yeah, Yoshi.
Sorry, I cut off your last two digits.
Yeah. Yoshi, thank you so much for the Pikmin OSG recommendations.
Yeah.
They will be part of the playlist from this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever we call window display.sprite prototype, we're either referring to clickable or base, depending on if we're using MZ. So now instead of this whole if statement, I can just say speaker sprite equals new window display sprite prototype. And now, whether I'm in MV or MZ, it will use the correct sprite prototype.
So let's test it out. I think that's the final thing we want to do.
All right. So first, let me make sure that it works in MV. It works in MV. In MZ. And then next, I need to temporarily disable display capture so that I can move plugins across the ways. Ignore that sound. That was a fine sound.
Yeah. So we're basically putting the plugin that we have, right? We're just putting it into the JS plugins folder in the MV project. Now, one thing that didn't come up this dev stream is you can set it up such that an MV and MZ project are pulling from the same set of like data files and things like that. We're not going to go into this because we believe it's not the best method, right, of like setting up your projects. But it is possible to just have an MV and MZ project pull from the same like JS file
And look at that.
data files and images and things like that.
We have a red circle.
Okay, yeah. And is the red circle talking?
The red circle is talking.
Okay. So, yeah, and with that, we have made a very basic plugin that uses plugin parameters and plugin commands that works in both MV and MZ. So I think that concludes the dev stream for now.
Oh wait, actually, no. There is one more thing we need to get to. The plugin window Myth window display may not support RPG Maker MZ, but we did it. We did everything we need to do, right? It supports MZ. So what are we missing? Well, there is one critical thing that the plugin manager uses to determine whether or not it supports MZ. And it's not whether arguments are a rectangle, it's not whether you're using Sprite clickable instead of Sprite base. It's whether you've got @target MZ at the top. Now it's fine. Now the alert doesn't show. That's it. So yeah, now it supports MZ because I added that line at the top.
Okay, right. Yeah, so that brings us to the conclusion of this dev stream. Isaiah, any final thoughts?
I think I was trying to come up with like a stupid final thought, but I'm not even like awake enough to come up with that.
It's okay. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine. Everybody wish Isaiah good night. He needs some sleep, right? Clearly. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in. We know this was more of a technical talk, right? This is more like MZ focus, so not everybody is necessarily here for that. But I have a good feeling that, like in the future, right, a lot of people will be referencing this one because, yeah, I think we covered a lot of really good information on how to build plugins. So sound off in chat if you're still around, right? Yeah, thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Isaiah, for staying up this late. And yeah, we'll catch you. I will cover CGC Game Jam stuff. Probably not during the stream, but maybe while we're sort of on the server, right? Via posts and stuff. Just know that is coming, right? I did want to spend some time at the end of the stream to cover that, but Isaiah needs to go to sleep, right? We need to conclude this. So yeah. Thank you, everyone. Right. Hopefully you enjoyed this MZ plugin, and we'll catch you later.
All right. See you then.